Welcome, everyone. Today, we are going to explore one of the most vital and continuous processes in the human body, the mechanism of respiration. You take thousands of breaths every single day without even thinking about it. But how exactly does air travel from the room around you all the way deep into your lungs? It is not just biology. It is a beautiful application of physics. By the end of this video, you will understand the exact mechanical and mathematical principles that keep us alive.
Let us start by building a simple mental model. Think of your lungs as a pair of empty balloons sitting inside a rigid bird cage, which represents your rib cage. At the very bottom of this cage sits a thick, trampoline-like muscle called the diaphragm. When you want to breathe in, you pull down on that trampoline. What happens? The empty space inside the cage suddenly gets much bigger. Because the space expands, the pressure inside drops. You do not actually suck air into your lungs. Instead, you expand your chest, and the heavy weight of the Earth's atmosphere literally pushes the air inside for you, exactly like pulling the plunger on a medical syringe.
Now that we have an intuitive picture, let us look at the formal biological terms. The scientific name for this mechanism is pulmonary ventilation. It consists of two alternating phases. The first is inspiration, or breathing in. This is an active process. Your diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles between your ribs contract, physically expanding your thoracic cavity. The second phase is expiration, or breathing out. During quiet, resting breathing, this is entirely passive. Those same muscles simply relax. Your lungs are highly elastic, so they naturally recoil, shrinking the chest volume back down. This continuous biological pump relies entirely on creating pressure gradients between the outside atmosphere and the tiny alveoli deep inside your lungs.
Building on our understanding of the biological pump, we must ask, why is this complex system so critical for survival? Every single cell in your body is like a tiny engine. To burn fuel like glucose and keep you alive, these engines require a constant supply of oxygen. But this metabolic fire produces a toxic exhaust gas called carbon dioxide. If carbon dioxide builds up, your blood becomes dangerously acidic. The mechanism of respiration is the only way our bodies can bulk transport fresh oxygen in and flush that stale carbon dioxide out. Without this continuous mechanical ventilation, cellular suffocation happens in mere minutes. This is exactly why mechanical ventilators in hospitals are so vital. They take over this exact pressure and volume work when a patient's own muscles fail.
Understanding why this pump is critical leads us directly to the physics that makes it possible. The entire mechanism of breathing is governed by Boyle's law. Conceptually, this law states that for a gas in a closed container, pressure and volume are inversely proportional. Let us look at the formula. P1 and V1 represent the initial pressure and volume of the container. P2 and V2 represent the final pressure and volume after the container changes size. In plain English, if you double the volume of a space, the pressure inside gets cut in half. Conversely, if you squeeze the space, the pressure shoots up. When your diaphragm contracts, your lung volume increases, which forces the internal pressure to drop below atmospheric pressure, drawing air in. Before we move on, let us see this with a concrete example. Imagine a person's lungs have an initial resting volume of 3.0 liters. The initial alveolar pressure is exactly equal to the atmospheric pressure at sea level, which is 760 millimeters of mercury. When the diaphragm contracts, the lung volume expands to 3.02 liters. We want to find the new alveolar pressure. We start with Boyle's law and rearrange it to isolate our unknown variable, P2. We then substitute our initial pressure, initial volume, and the new expanded volume into the equation. Multiplying and dividing gives us a final pressure of approximately 755 millimeters of mercury. Because this is lower than the outside atmosphere, it creates a vacuum effect of 5 millimeters of mercury that sucks fresh air into the lungs. Now that we have used Boyle's law to find the pressure difference, we need to know how much air actually flows as a result. This brings us to the bulk flow equation. Conceptually, this formula tells us how fast a fluid or gas will move based on the forces pushing it and the friction slowing it down. F stands for the flow rate of air. Delta P represents the pressure gradient, which is the difference between the outside atmosphere and the inside of your lungs. R represents the airway resistance, which comes from the friction air encounters in your windpipe. If the pressure difference gets larger, airflow increases. But if resistance goes up, airflow decreases. This relationship is absolutely crucial for understanding respiratory diseases. Let us apply this airflow equation to a real-world scenario. We are given a healthy student who generates a pressure gradient of 2 millimeters of mercury during a normal breath. Their healthy, open airways have a minimal resistance of 1 unit. We want to find out how fast the air is moving into their lungs. We choose the airflow equation because it directly connects pressure, resistance, and flow. We substitute the pressure gradient of 2 into the numerator and the normal resistance of 1 into the denominator. Dividing these gives us a healthy airflow rate of 2 liters per second. This final answer physically represents a normal, effortless breath where the lungs are functioning with minimal friction. Now, let us compare that healthy student to an asthmatic student. The given information states that the asthmatic student generates the exact same pressure gradient of 2 millimeters of mercury. Their breathing muscles are working just as hard. However, their constricted airways have a much higher resistance of 4 units. We again use the airflow equation to see the impact. We place the same pressure effort of 2 in the numerator, but now we divide by the high resistance of 4 in the denominator. This results in a severely reduced airflow rate of 0.5 liters per second. Physically, this means that despite putting in the exact same muscular effort, the asthmatic student receives significantly less air. So, we have successfully calculated the airflow for both students. This brings us to a formal mathematical proof of how asthma impacts breathing. In this first chunk of the proof, we are setting out to establish the exact proportional relationship between the healthy state and the asthmatic state. We take our 2 calculated values, the healthy airflow of 2 liters per second and the asthmatic airflow of 0.5 liters per second. By setting up a ratio of the asthmatic flow divided by the healthy flow, we can mathematically isolate the effect of the constricted airways. This ratio will help us see the intuition behind why asthma feels so suffocating, which we will solve in the next step. Continuing our derivation, we now substitute our numbers into the ratio. We divide 0.5 by 2. Simplifying this fraction gives us exactly 1/4. By rearranging the equation, we prove that the asthmatic airflow is exactly 1/4 of the healthy airflow. The mathematical reasoning here shows a direct inverse relationship. Because the airway resistance quadrupled from 1 to 4, The resulting airflow dropped to 1/4 of its normal value. This proves why asthma patients feel like they are suffocating, even when their breathing muscles are working perfectly. They literally have to work 4 times as hard just to get a normal breath of air. Now that we have proven the mathematics, let us visualize these mechanics in action. On the screen, you are looking at a side-by-side comparison of the human chest during a breathing cycle. On the left, we have inspiration. Notice the arrows pointing outward from the ribcage, showing expansion, while the diaphragm at the bottom flattens and moves downward. As the labels indicate, this increases the volume and decreases the pressure, pulling air in. On the right, we see expiration. The arrows reverse. The ribcage shrinks inward, and the diaphragm relaxes upward into a dome shape. This decreases the chest volume, which increases the internal pressure, forcing the stale air out. This diagram perfectly captures the biological pump we have been discussing. We have covered the full topic of the mechanism of respiration, so let us reinforce the most important ideas. First, remember that breathing is essentially a biological mechanical pump. You do not suck air in, you change your chest volume to create pressure gradients. Second, this entire process is governed by Boyle's law, which dictates that increasing the volume of your chest drops the internal pressure, allowing the atmosphere to push air in. Finally, the actual amount of air you get depends on the airflow equation. A healthy pressure gradient can be completely undermined if airway resistance increases, as we saw with asthma. You now have a solid mathematical understanding of how your life-sustaining respiratory system functions. Great job!